The NHL season is already around 20% done, and that's a pretty decent sample size, so I wanted to make a video going over the most surprising player from all 32 NHL teams, and of course this is all relative to the expectations that I had for these players coming into the season, so be sure to keep that in mind, and be sure to let me know down below in the comments who you think the most surprising players have been in the NHL so far this season. And if this is your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all year round, be sure to hit that subscribe button. We're getting super close to 81,000. So with that all being said, let's go ahead and start off with the Anaheim Ducks, and my pick for their most surprising player definitely has to be goaltender Lukas Dostal, who has been one of the best goaltenders in the entire NHL so far this season. According to Evolving Hockey's model, he leads the NHL with a goal saved above expected of 14.59, and he's managed to secure a point for the Anaheim Ducks in 6 of his 12 starts so far this season, which doesn't sound crazy, but considering the fact that he plays behind a team that literally cannot score goals, I think that's pretty impressive. The Boston Bruins are up next, and I'm going to go with a player who has been surprising in a bad way, and that is centerman Charlie Coyle. His production has really fallen off of a cliff after putting up career highs across the board last season. He's only got 3 points in 17 games so far this season. Lack of production from the middle six is a big reason why the Boston Bruins have had an underwhelming start to the season, and Coyle is one of the main players in that middle six that have really struggled to produce. The Buffalo Sabres are up next, and my pick for their most surprising player is going to be Jack Quinn. I made a video before the season started talking about some players that I thought would have a big breakout year. I've said in the past that I believe Jack Quinn has all the tools and potential to be a consistent 30-plus goal scorer in the NHL, and I still feel that way, but this season so far has been anything but a breakout year for Jack Quinn, as he's really struggled to find the back of the net. Just 1 goal in 15 games, a shooting percentage of just 4.5 compared to last season where he had a shooting percentage of 16.1. I feel like it's only a matter of time before that evens out and he starts to find the back of the net a little bit more. Moving along now, my pick for the Calgary Flames most surprising player is going to be Igor Sharangovich, who really broke out last season, hit the 30 goal mark for the first time in his career, and although he has missed a handful of games so far this season with injury, when he's been in the lineup, he hasn't been able to find that same kind of scoring touch he had last season. Hopefully he's able to get it going soon, because the Calgary Flames could definitely use some more goals, as they rank just 23rd in the NHL currently in goals per game. The most surprising player from the Carolina Hurricanes definitely has to be Martin Necas, who not only has been their most surprising player, I think he's been one of the most surprising players in the entire NHL. He's already up to 25 points in just 15 games. The only players in the NHL with more points than Necas so far this season are Kirill Kaprizov and Nathan MacKinnon. You have to imagine the Carolina Hurricanes are very pleased with their decision to extend Martin Necas as opposed to trading him like everyone thought they were going to in the offseason. Next up, we have the Chicago Blackhawks, and my pick for their most surprising player is going to be Philip Kurashev. He's somebody who has really not benefited from the Chicago Blackhawks adding depth to their wing, bringing in guys like Bertuzzi and Teravainen, and also getting Taylor Hall back from his injury. This has led to Kurashev playing a much smaller role than the role he played last season. His ice time per game is down over 3 full minutes, and his point totals definitely reflect that. Only 4 points so far for Kurashev in 15 games, compared to last season where he finished second on the Blackhawks in scoring with 18 goals and 54 points in 75 games. My pick for the Avalanche is going to be goaltender Alexander Georgiev. Had a fantastic first season with the Avalanche, took a big step back last season. I kind of figured this season he would level out somewhere in between, but that has definitely not been the case. I would say Georgiev has probably been the worst starting goaltender in the entire NHL so far this season. A save percentage of just .863 through his first 10 starts. He's dead last in the NHL in goals saved above expected. Now, he has won his last 3 starts, so hopefully for the Avalanche's sake, this is him starting to turn things around, because it's going to be difficult to take them seriously as a Stanley Cup contender if this is the kind of goaltending they're going to get all season long. Moving on now to the Columbus Blue Jackets, my pick for their most surprising player is going to be Kevin Labanc, who signed a PTO with the New Jersey Devils and had a very strong showing in the preseason. Ultimately, the Devils would release him from his PTO, but he did well enough to earn himself a job with the Columbus Blue Jackets, and it's looking like he may be reviving his career a little bit in Columbus. He's currently tied for 5th on the Blue Jackets in scoring with 8 points, despite only playing in 11 of their 15 games. Obviously still a very small sample size, but he's starting to look more and more like the Kevin Labanc we saw in the early years of his career, as opposed to the Kevin Labanc we've seen over the last few seasons. My pick for the Dallas Stars' most surprising player is definitely going to be Jason Robertson, who, after exploding for a career-high 109 points in the 2022-23 season, just hasn't been able to get back to that superstar level. In terms of production, we saw a pretty sizable step back last season, and so far this season we've seen an even bigger step back as Jason Robertson is scoring at just a half point per game pace. Now, he did have an injury in the offseason, so seeing him get off to this slow start is kind of making me wonder, is that something that could still be bothering him? Next up, we have the Red Wings. This is an easy one for me. It has to be goaltender Cam Talbot, who at 37 years old is playing like a Vezina Trophy candidate. 5-2-1 through his first 9 appearances, a save percentage of .927. Cam Talbot has far and away been the Red Wings' most valuable player so far this season. I don't even like to think about where the Red Wings would be right now without him. Next up, we have the Edmonton Oilers, and my pick for their most surprising player is definitely going to be Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Depth scoring has been an issue for the Oilers so far this season. They're not getting a whole lot of production outside of the usual suspects, McDavid and Draisaitl, but even in recent years when they weren't getting a whole lot of depth scoring, they'd still have guys like Hyman and Nugent-Hopkins producing outside of McDavid and Draisaitl, but that really hasn't been the case this season. Although Zach Hyman has started to heat up a little bit, he's got 6 points in his last 6 games, they're still waiting on Ryan Nugent-Hopkins to get it going. Moving on now to the Florida Panthers, I'm going to go with Sam Bennett as their most surprising player. Point per game so far through 15 games, 9 of those 15 points are goals. Sam Bennett really stepped up during that stretch Barkov was out of the lineup, and he's continued to play really well since Barkov has came back. The LA Kings are up next, and this is a really easy one. It has to be Alex Laferriere, already up to 9 goals and 15 points in 18 games, only 8 points away from tying his point total from last season, and he's doing a lot of his damage at even strength. He actually ranks 30th in the entire NHL in even strength points per 60 minutes. Next up, we have the Minnesota Wild, and I'm going to go with goaltender Philip Gustafsson as their most surprising player. He struggled a little bit last season, finishing with a save percentage of just .899, but so far this season he's bounced back in a big way and looks a lot more like the Philip Gustafsson that we saw in the 2022-23 season. He's definitely been a massive reason why the Minnesota Wild have gotten off to such a strong start. Moving on now to the Montreal Canadiens, I'm going to go with Alex Newhook as their most surprising player. Had a promising first year with the Canadiens, career highs in goals and points despite only playing in 55 games, and I know a lot of Canadiens fans were expecting him to build off of that and have a really big year, but that hasn't been the case so far. Just 4 points in 16 games. His ice time is down compared to last season. He's somebody that really needs to get it going because outside of their top line, Montreal just isn't getting a whole lot of production. The Nashville Predators are up next, and I'm going with Tommy Novak as their most surprising player. Similar to what I said about Jack Quinn earlier in the video, heading into the season, I'd predicted Tommy Novak to have a big breakout season, likely centering the second line with Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault on his wings, and that's how he started the season, but that trio really didn't work out. Novak has just 4 points in 12 games. That second line center position has really been an issue for Nashville. They've tried a couple of different players in that spot, and nobody has stuck. Nobody has taken the ball and ran with it. Moving on now to the Devils, I'm going to go with Stefan Nason as their most surprising player. Early on this season, he has looked like one of the better value signings from 2024 free agency. Already up to 7 goals and 14 points through 19 games, on pace to shatter the career highs he set last season with the Hurricanes. Players like Nason and Paul Cotter have really provided the Devils with a nice layer of secondary scoring. Moving on now to the Islanders, I definitely have to go with Noah Dobson as their most surprising player. After exploding for a career-high 70 points last season, he's only got 6 so far this season through 16 games. He's still looking for his first goal. The Islanders as a whole have really struggled offensively so far this season, but the power play especially could really benefit from Noah Dobson getting it going and starting to heat up. The power play ranks just 29th in the NHL currently. Next up, we have the Rangers, and for their most surprising player, I'm going with Will Cooley, who's having a breakout season. 11 points already in just 14 games. He plays a key role on what is arguably the best third line in the entire NHL, alongside Philip Hedl and Capo Caco. Those three together have been lights out. I feel like the only other third line that you could make an argument has been better this season than Hedl, Caco, and Will Cooley is the Jets' third line of Lowry, Appleton, and Niederreiter. Moving on now to the Senators, this is an easy one. It has to be Adam Gaudette as their most surprising player. With the exception of a couple of games last season with St. Louis, over the last few seasons, Gaudette has spent basically all of his time in the American Hockey League. Not somebody I expected to play much of a role, if any role at all, in the NHL for the Senators this season. I definitely didn't have him being tied for third on the team in goals this far into the season on my bingo card, but he's definitely provided them with some nice depth scoring. Moving on now to the Flyers, I'm going to go with Jamie Drysdale as their most surprising player. Somebody who a lot of people expected to have a big breakout season. He's the big piece they got in return for Cutter Gauthier, so obviously there's a lot of pressure on him to perform, and obviously it's still very early. Drysdale is still young, and the sample size of him playing with the Flyers is small, but he has struggled mightily as a member of the Flyers, especially this season in the 15 games he's appeared in, and unfortunately he now finds himself injured again, which has been a common theme for Drysdale throughout his young career so far. Moving on now to the Penguins, I'm definitely going with goaltender Tristan Jarry as their most surprising player. Lost the starting job after getting lit up for a few games to start the season, ended up doing a conditioning stint in the American Hockey League, and his numbers down there were very good, so hopefully for the Penguins' sake, he's figured things out and is much better the next time he gets to start in the NHL, because this is just year one of that 5-year deal he signed that carries a cap hit of $5.375 million. Moving on now to the Sharks, I'm definitely going with Granlund as their most surprising player. His stock has improved drastically over the last year and a half. 60 points in 69 games last season, and he's one-upping that this season as he's already up to 18 points in 17 games. Very impressive production from a guy that's playing really difficult minutes on one of the worst offensive teams in the league. The Kraken are up next, and I'm going to go with defenseman Riker Evans as their most surprising player. Not doing anything crazy, but flying under the radar and having a very strong sophomore season, averaging over 20 minutes a night. He's scoring at a half point per game pace with 8 in 16 games. It's already looking like Seattle may have gotten a steal drafting Riker Evans in the second round of the 2021 draft. Moving on now to the Blues, I'm definitely going to go with defenseman Philip Broberg as their most surprising player, who is obviously now injured, but his first 12 games of the season were very good. I think most people expected he would have a career year because he was likely going to get a much bigger opportunity in St. Louis than he ever got in Edmonton, or they wouldn't have given him that offer sheet. But even still, I was surprised by his early season play. He had a point in each of the Blues' first 6 games of the season, and even though he's missed the last 4 games, he's still currently tied for third on the Blues in scoring. The Tampa Bay Lightning are up next, and I'm going to go with Anthony Cirelli as their most surprising player. Cirelli has never really been known for his offensive flair, still a guy that can get you, between 15 to 20 goals and 40 to 45 points, but his defensive game is where he really makes a big impact. Cirelli is one of the better shutdown centermen in the league, but so far this season, it's looking like he may have finally hit another gear offensively, as he's already up to 13 points in 14 games to go along with the fantastic defensive play. Moving on now to the Toronto Maple Leafs for their most surprising player, I definitely have to go with goaltender Anthony Stolarz. Similar to what I said about Stefan Nason earlier in the video, Stolarz is another guy who's already looking like one of the best value signings from 2024 free agency. Now obviously Stolarz was very good with Florida last season, but in a much more limited role. He only played in 27 games during the regular season, was obviously the clear-cut backup behind Sergei Bobrovsky. There wasn't a ton of pressure on him to perform. This season, that is not the case, as he doesn't have the luxury of playing behind a Bobrovsky. There's obviously going to be a ton of pressure on any goaltender to perform playing for the Maple Leafs, and so far this season, Stolarz has done a better job than I think anyone could have expected. He has been one of the better goaltenders in the entire league. Moving on now to Utah, and for their most surprising player, I'm going to go with defenseman Michael Kesselring, who did really well in limited, sheltered minutes last season as a member of the Arizona Coyotes, and this season with Utah, he's continued to do very well, but now in a much larger role. He has been a bona fide top 4 defenseman so far this season for Utah. It's looking like he could potentially be a key fixture on the right side of their blue line for a very long time, and it's pretty cool to see him breaking out like this because he's a bit of a late bloomer. He was a 6th rounder by the Oilers back in 2018. Next up, we have the Canucks, and this is a very easy one. It's going to be Kevin Lankinen, who signed a very cheap 1-year deal with Vancouver to add some goaltending depth, as they knew they were going to be without Thatcher Demko to start the season. Even with Kevin Lankinen, I feel like most people expected Shelovs to be the guy to get the bulk of the workload with Thatcher Demko on the shelf. Shelovs obviously came up pretty big for the Canucks down the stretch last season and in the playoffs, but he really struggled out of the gate this season, and when Kevin Lankinen got his opportunity, he never looked back. He's got just 1 regulation loss so far through 11 games. He has been phenomenal for the Canucks. Moving on now to the Vegas Golden Knights for their most surprising player, I'm definitely going to go with Pavel Dorofei Dorofeyev. With the amount of depth Vegas lost in the offseason, Dorofeyev is one of those guys that a lot of people were looking at as a potential breakout candidate. He was likely going to get an opportunity to play a much larger role, and that is exactly what's happening. And I think Dorofeyev is doing a lot better than anyone could have expected, as he's actually currently leading the Vegas Golden Knights in goals with 9 in 16 games. Moving on now to the Washington Capitals, you could go a lot of different ways with this one, but I'm going to go with Dylan Strome, a guy that I think has been really underrated over the last few seasons. His first 2 years with the Capitals, back-to-back 20-plus goals, 65-plus point seasons, but this season he has taken his game to a whole other level, and I feel like as the season has gone along, we're just kind of waiting for him to slow down, and it's just not happening. In fact, it seems like he's actually only getting better. Already 23 points for Dylan Strome in 15 games. He is the league leader in even strength points per 60 minutes. He has legitimately been one of the best centermen in the entire NHL, and it's nice to see him finally getting a ton of praise. And now finally, finishing off the video, we have the Winnipeg Jets, the best team in hockey. You could go a lot of different ways with this one. It seems like everyone on Winnipeg is having a career year, but for me, I decided to go with defenseman Neil Pionk, who's already up to 17 points in 16 games. That's the kind of production that we've gotten used to seeing from Josh Morrissey, not Neil Pionk. Now, obviously, I don't expect him to be a point-per-game defenseman all season long, but it's looking like he's going to shatter all of his previous career highs, and he's picking a good year to have the best season of his career because it's a contract year for him, and if he continues to produce like this, he's gonna get paid in free agency. So that is going to wrap up today's video, going over the most surprising player from all 32 NHL teams so far this season. As always, I want to know what you guys are thinking, so if you disagree with any of my picks, feel free to let me know what your list would look like down below in the comments. If you made it all this way to the end of the video and you ended up enjoying yourself, please remember to leave the video a like. It's the best way to let me know that you enjoyed, and it does actually help out the videos a ton. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all year round, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all again soon.